Big up, big up, big up to all the great defeaters, one and all. Welcome to the breakdown. Someone missing here? Am I missing something? Yeah, I'm missing my trusty partner, BaseDaKID. I'm not really sure what's happened. Tried to reach out, so I'm hoping he joins us at some point. But I thought, why not go live and just get engaged with the people who are waiting rather than keep you guys waiting. As you all know, I have been away for a few weeks, and I wish to thank Danny from Fight Fan TV for covering for me while I was away, and I hope you enjoyed the content. Now, because we've got quite a bit of stuff to cover in the show today, because it was quite of a bumper weekend for boxing, and I myself was at the show at the O2, the Matchroom show headlined by Anthony Joshua versus Robert Helenius. What I thought I would do was I would take the opportunity to try and engage with you guys about Terence Bud Crawford versus Errol Spence. Got my light reflecting on it, but yeah, I was obviously there, and it was, to say the least, it was a great, fantastic atmosphere, and I saw one of the best performances by a boxer in my life. I mean, you know, there's a lot of talk about, oh, Spence wasn't this or Spence wasn't that. Was he weight drained? Did he train? Did he overtrain? Etc. etc. But to me, he tried his best, but his best was just nowhere near good enough. And I don't think it goes down as a completely one-sided fight because he was trying. But I just honestly feel that styles makes fights, and on this situation, Crawford's style and his maturity was just way too much for Errol Spence on the night. So, guys, if you want to throw in questions into the chat, and if anyone is even interested in coming on with me and chopping it up, then let's do that until BaseDaKID comes up. I'm going to put in the chat the link if anybody wants to come in. It's just a quick one. I don't expect Base to be too long. I'm hoping he gets in contact fairly soon. But if anybody, as I said, wants to come in, there, my guys, is the link. So as we would normally do, I'm going to give a salute out to everybody who is in the chat. And I know I have to go back because according to this, the first person in the chat was Dan the Man, but I know that ain't the truth, Roof, because yesterday evening when I set this up and I was loading content, I saw somebody really early. Nope, can't see. I can't see it. Somebody was in here way early. Somebody was in here way earlier. Way early. So, let's go. I can't recall who it was, but let's go. Dan the Man, Southeast 15. Here he is. BaseDaKID is here. LS Vlogs, bang. Big up to you. Philip Ansar, what's up? Big up to you. Fight Fan TV, Danny, as I said, much appreciation for you being in the house over the last few weeks in my absence. Declan, what's up? He says, where's Rajab? I'm about to light up. So I don't know what that's about, but I look forward to it. Daniel J. Botem, big up to yourself. Skylander, the editor. Korn, I know you was in the room last week. New name for me. Welcome, my friend. SB, that's another one for me. big up to yourself. Chris Collymore, welcome. Tony, aka Mr. Las Vegas, back in sunny England. Yes, sir. Jam Down 187, the hardest working man. Yes, sir. Sylvestre Salamois, 2011. Salute to you, sir. Hot Pies. Wouldn't be a room without Hot Pies being in it. And Ada 12 or Ada 12 from Birmingham, Brumtown in the house. Big up to yourself for coming in and joining us. And let's get it on. So, Philip, in regard to Teddy Atlas, we will get back onto that one a little bit later. So nobody's thrown in any questions for me about the show from a couple of weeks back. So I guess welcome to BaseDaKID.
Ladies and gentlemen, apologies for the delay. Totally my fault. Apologies for the delay of the show. Also, Tony, thank you very much for starting early. I was a bit MIA, a few bits and pieces, but we are here now. Tony, you've done all of the big ups and everything, so it looks like we're good on that front. Are you ready to crack on and get into it?
I am indeed. I am indeed. As you know, I'm on holiday at the moment from school. So a great 2 weeks away in America. Come back and I'm ready to rock and roll. As I mentioned earlier, I have been to boxing since I come back. I was at the Matchroom card on Saturday night. And there's a lot of action to talk about. So without any further delay, my friend, let's get in amongst.
Right, so what we normally do is you start with a big fight, and then you kind of go through the other stuff, and then you go and you end with a big fight. However, as we did not have a show last week, I felt it was only right that we start just by going over the couple of women's fights that were on the card of Jake Paul and Nate Diaz. We won't go into that one because chances are people probably haven't seen it. To be totally honest, it's not really going to be a great or a huge breakdown of those fights in particular, because they were what they were. But to give a brief overview on specifically the Amanda Serrano Heavy Hardy 2 fight,
seems that I loaded that with some sound on it. So
you did. No worries. Decide leave that one.
okay.
Basically, long story short, Heather Hardy, incredibly tough. I actually thought that she would get stopped in that fight purely because at the age of, I think, 41 now or 42, she hadn't made 126 pounds in about 4 years. I think it was 3 to 4 years. So, and I knew that it was hard for her to make then. So her getting on the scales and making the weight, I just felt she would pretty much be dead at the weight. And Amanda, with the punching power that she does have primarily, I just thought, yeah, it may just be one of those by accumulation. However, Heather weathered the storm throughout the majority of the rounds, and in the final round, ultimately, put out the war cry essentially for her and Amanda, and they just slugged it out. And that was an entertaining scrap. I've still not seen the entire thing because, as you know, everyone will probably know that was behind the paywall on DAZN, and I didn't pay for the actual the card in itself. So yeah, because of that. Sorry, ladies and gentlemen. Tony, on your phone, change it to desktop mode so that it doesn't bring you in when that happens. happens. Just as I said the other day, just go into your settings and change it to desktop, and that won't happen. With regards to the other fight, which was the Shadeja Green versus Olivia Curry fight, again, this one, I'm not gonna lie, I didn't know who Curry was, but I checked the record and I checked who she had fought, and yeah, the level of competition wasn't particularly that great. And there was only one, because she only had sort of one stoppage within that level as well. And I saw the person who she'd lost to, who's no great shakes also. I felt, okay, Shadeja Green will get her out of there within sort of 3-4 rounds. Ended up being wrong on that one. You know, Shadeja, to a degree, you could say labored to a points decision, but in pretty much complete control of the fight from start to finish, but did sort of get pressed between sort of rounds 5 to 8. I feel like she sort of had her best moments, but Shadeja obviously managed to get the second wind, I think, around round 7, and sort of finished that fight fairly clearly. And yeah, that sort of sets up either the Savannah Marshall fight or the Clarissa Shields fight. Now, Shields and Shadeja Green have been talking most in that sense, so it's probably more likely that fight in itself could happen before Shields goes back to PFL, but we will see. Yeah, and so I wanted to just sort of touch on those two quickly before we get to sort of this weekend stuff. Tony, have you got any thoughts outside of obviously not outside of not having seen the fights themselves, just about the competitors before we move on?
No, I mean, I picked up the Amanda Serrano because I do enjoy watching Amanda Serrano work. I'm always interested to see what version of Jordan 1 she's going to wear in the ring. It's interesting because I was sparring and I was wearing Jordan 1s. But yeah, no, I like seeing, you know, where she's going. Obviously, this was, to me, an opportunity to give Curry back, Hardy back some work that was, you know, appreciated from early in her career. Hardy, as you said, very tough customer, just kept coming, couldn't really dodge anything that Amanda was throwing. So it was target practice for Amanda Serrano. But I think when I compare it to her performance before, where I thought she labored a bit, this seemed to be a little bit more of a confidence boosting type of performance ahead of anything more significant that she would plan to do in her next up and coming fights. So from that perspective, I think it was a big confidence boost for her. And, you know, let's see where she goes from there. Shadeja Green, I mean, she's a big hitter. She looked like she was panting out by about round 8. You know, I think if she goes in with Clarissa just got too much engine for her, in my opinion.
That's fair. Bear with me a second. I'm going to see if I can turn something off on this computer. Does that work? Nope. Okay, that's fine. Okay, so what we shall do. Where should we take it next? Okay, so let's go to. All right, yeah, let's talk about Emmanuel Navarrete and Oscar Valdez. Let's start with that one.
You sure? Because there's a lot to talk about.
Yeah, that's a big fight. So we'll start with that one, and then we have the main talking points, which we know what they're gonna be. So we'll start with that one because that's a lot more cut and dry compared to some of the others.
Okay.
So I'll let you take that one.
All right. So I've got my notepad. Emmanuel Navarrete, 37-1, defending his WBO super featherweight title against 2-weight division champion Oscar Valdez, 31-1. Immediately, I noticed the height difference, 5'7" versus 5'5.5. But more importantly, that big, long 72-inch reach versus a 66-inch reach, which Navarrete uses. As you can see, he's throwing those punches right on the end, right on the very end. He's leaning over. So it kind of is a massive advantage for Navarrete that he's got those long levers. Now, the thing was, before the fight, we all know Navarrete is all about volume. He throws on averages 1,200 punches a fight. And, you know, there was no doubt that he was going to be a constant thorn in the side of Oscar Valdez. The question was, could Oscar Valdez work out the nuances in the way that Navarrete fights and position himself so that he could operate on the inside of Navarrete's punches and negate that with his own solid combinations from the inside? Now, you can see from some of this action that I've uploaded that Navarrete is literally keeping Valdez on the end of his shots and working with such significant volume that it doesn't really give Valdez a great amount of opportunity to walk in. And even when he does walk in, he's getting something like that right hand there. And then look, the long left hook at the end of it, and then, you know, you see the inside punches, but they're still quite long from a distance, or they're mid-range punches. Then when Oscar gets in, he's already too far to throw that hook, and he ends up getting more damage. And as you can see from the pictures, his eyes gets significant damage. Now, Navarrete is extremely awkward. I mean, if I were to show my kids the way he boxes, he's very open because he throws punches and leaves his hands down. You can see when he throws his left-right combination, his hands are in a really bad position at the end of it. And you'd think that would be meat and drink for the likes of Oscar Valdez, who, if he could slip inside of those long levers, would be able to operate with his own hooks and uppercuts. Obviously, you know, Oscar is well known for his power in that he had a knockout of the year against Miguel Bachel a couple of years ago. But in reality, he's actually not been that destructive a puncher outside of that one single fight. So it kind of comes to light that, you know what, he hit Navarrete with his very best punches and they didn't have any effect. In fact, in round 3, when Navarrete came back to his corner said, "Do you feel the power in his punches?" And Navarrete's response was, "Nah." So, you know, as you can see from the CompuBox figures there, 1,038 punches thrown by Navarrete against 436 by Valdez. Huge disparity. The difference is just so much that it means that, you know what, hard work beats talent when talent doesn't work hard. And that's the mantra that I keep telling my kids. If you keep throwing hands, if you keep giving your opponent something to think about, you will ultimately, more often than not, be successful. Now, a lot of the punches thrown by Navarrete actually don't hit target. He's so ungainly with his technique that he misses more than he throws significantly. In fact, I think it's 19% hit rate, which in comparison to, or might have been 16% hit rate, which in comparison to Valdez's hit rate, which was 22%, Valdez is more accurate with his shots. But when you throw that much more shots, twice as many shots as your opponent, it renders your success rate, you know, untalkable. A couple of things that came to light, some new things that I noticed CompuBox has started measuring some new metrics. Navarrete's volume, control of distance, and chin ruled the night as he landed 18 of 87 punches per round compared to 12 of 36 for Valdez. So 87 punches per round in comparison to 36 from Valdez. The difference in landed is not significant. It's 18 to 12. So you kind of think, if I can just nab, you know, 4 or 5 rounds where I can outland my guy, I might be more in this fight, but he doesn't. Navarrete, 25% of Navarrete's thrown combinations were 4 to 5 plus combos. 25% of his combos had 4 or 5 plus punches, while 60% of Valdez's combinations were just 1-2 punches. An illustration of how Valdez was with Navarrete's output. A real look at Navarrete's amazing work rate versus Valdez. Navarrete threw 70 or more punches in 11 out of the 12 rounds and averaged 107 thrown per round in the last 3 rounds. So he ups his work rate. Now, it's interesting about his work rate because at the very start of the fight, or round 1, when Navarrete is throwing hands and Valdez comes back to the corner, Eddie Reynoso tells Valdez that don't worry, slow yourself down. He's going to tire. And I thought to myself at that exact moment, that's the worst bit of advice you could give your fighter. Because we know what Navarrete is about. He is not going to slow down. He has an unbelievable engine. His work rate increases. So there's no reason that you got beat up in the first round that you should slow down, pick your shots more accurately. Yes, pick your shots, but don't slow down. Not against that guy. No way. Here's another interesting graphic. The red is Navarrete. The blue is Valdez. As you can see, the blue shows the rounds where Valdez out punches Navarrete. And the differential is massive. And as you can see, it's increasing round by round, where the last 3 rounds are massive in comparison to Valdez. And remember, if you didn't know this, round 8 and 9, Navarrete is fighting with one hand. He damages his right hand. So a whole bunch of statistics and analysis was done in this fight because it was a very intriguing matchup. Before the fight, there was a lot of people swaying towards Valdez, but clearly, if you didn't watch the fight, it is a fight worth going to watch because it has a lot of action. But yeah, hopefully you get a feeling of how the fight went. Base, over to you.
It's arguably one of the best breakdowns you've ever done on this show. That was so thorough. I don't really have to do much apart from just give an overview of. To me, one thing that I'll say is, now I didn't hear that particular comment about slow down, he'll tire, but I think if you look at his work rate from super bantam up to sort of super featherweight, there has been a slight decline. Like, I know in his last fight he didn't throw as many punches as is normally expected from him. So I guess maybe the thought process was, with those extra 8 pounds from where he used to be, maybe there wasn't, he didn't have the same. He obviously would always have a gas tank, but maybe it would just slow up enough for you to be able to pick the perfect shot. Now, with regards to the actual fight itself, I mean, it's weird. You look at the faces of both guys, and then you say, oh well, one guy just got beat up for 12 rounds. When that's not exactly the case. It was one-sided in the sense of volume and activity, but it wasn't one-sided in the sense of competition, competitiveness, and even like danger. Because make no mistake, Emmanuel Navarrete did get hit with some fairly decent work throughout a majority of the rounds as well. There was a lot of times it was small counter punches. He was doing very well at riding shots, like slipping some shots here and there, but he did get hit. The fact that he didn't mark up at all was, we've got to say it was pretty. I mean, you've got to say it's pretty remarkable that literally he left the ring looking exactly the same way as he stepped in. I've seen a lot of the memes about that as well, which was rather hilarious. but yeah, it was a great performance. I also went for Valdez. I thought that with Navarrete's activity, Valdez being a very good counterpuncher, he would find a shot in between the target, which he did on several occasions. But again, Navarrete was just doing well enough to be able to not take anything clean, and he was riding the sort of the return shots and coming back and just basically overwhelming Valdez. So yeah, big ups to both guys. It was a great fight. Not my fight of the year, but it was a tremendous fight. It was another top quality, top ranked production. So yeah, shout outs to all of them. But I'm gonna turn this off because I definitely don't need to be talking for the next 3 minutes. If there's anything you just want to follow up on that one, Tony, feel free.
Yeah, I just want to answer the question that was put in the chat. It was a good fight. Not my fight of the year either, but certainly a very good fight. And in a year where we're getting great fights, the fight of the year actually it's going to be a toss-up. There's so many good fights out there. Emotionally, Spence Crawford is a great fight for me, but I still think there are better fights that have been contested this year.
Okay, so moving on from that one really quick. Let's just make sure. Yeah, I see 5 fans in the chat saying that he thought that Valdez would have won. Also, I think a lot of us did just due to the style matchup. But I guess we got to start putting a bit more respect on Navarrete's name. The unorthodox abilities are one thing, but he seems to. It's almost like he's improved overnight in selection and evasiveness as well. So. And yeah, the style it worked for him. He overcame that, and it was a good moment. All right, moving on from that one real quick. I guess we'll go and talk about the other fight that took place over in the States, which was Manny Rodriguez versus Melvin Lopez. Rodriguez, I believe, had a straight unanimous decision. 2-time bantamweight champion now. I haven't seen the entire fight up till now. I was meant to go and check that, but things have been sort of there's a lot of things been going on this week. However, it is so Melvin Lopez was a southpaw, but he was a much smaller target for Rodriguez than what he's normally used to. But Rodriguez basically had that sort of that height and reach on him. He, even though he was able to knock Lopez down on a couple of occasions, Lopez did just sort of carry on and battle through. But yeah, just that range. Melvin Lopez just couldn't get through that range, and which is a bit surprising, especially when you've got an arm to parry that that initial jab, but he was getting caught with the jab over the top quite frequent, where you would expect him to be able to sort of parry it away. But he just hadn't had any fights really at that level. Whereas, you had Manny Rodriguez, who has been at that level for a number of years. Even though it was only 2 rounds, let's not forget he did share the ring with Naoya Inoue. He's also been in there with sort of Raymar Gabayo. One of the fights I'm still very salty at till this day, as to how that was given as a victory, and just a few others. So overall, good performance from him. Tony, just talk to the people briefly about that, whether you saw it or not. Just give your thoughts on that. I just need to plug my laptop in. 1 sec.
Yes. So I didn't actually see that fight. So unfortunately, I can't do that. But what I can do is move on to the next fight, and in your absence, start talking about a fight that Base gave me a heads up about while I was traveling to the O2. Was on the undercard of the AJ versus Helenius. And it was a guy called George Liddard versus a Dutchman called Oosterwegel. And Base let me know that I was missing a classic, and when I got in, obviously it was all over. But I managed to catch the rewind of it. Is the whole fight is available on YouTube. If you haven't seen it, it's worth a watch. George Liddard is someone I have seen before, so I have seen his style before. But this fight was actually a very entertaining fight. In the first 2 rounds, you wouldn't have said it. So once again, I've managed to upload the thing with some audio. So I will play it briefly. I'll just keep quiet for a second. So in that clip, you can see George Liddard on the attack against Oosterwegel. And that was, I think, very early in the fight where George Liddard was pretty much dominating in this 8-rounder. George has a fantastic engine. I'm going to start saying that from the scratch. He fought at a very high pace. He picks beautiful shots. Now, I got to give some of the reason for George looking as good as he was because Oosterwegel's defense is very porous. But you can only beat what is in front of you. Now, it wasn't all one-way traffic, because although Liddard comes out and he is smacking Oosterwegel all over the ring from pillar to post, and it looks like, man, this can't carry on. If it carries on like this, then the referee's going to have to stop the fight, because it just looked like an absolute beatdown. But then after the second round, Oosterwegel actually got, his corner was so vocal. They were swearing like troopers in his corner about how he needed to get back into the fight. And to his credit, he started to flurry back at George. And it became a battle of will. Who's going to buckle here? Because he was catching George with some absolute haymakers. But George was saying, I'm taking that. George didn't take a back step. He wasn't like, oh, no, I'm in trouble, I better back up. No, he stood his ground, kept his hands high, rode what he could, blocked what he could, but he was just continuing, pop, in between the shots, popping around Oosterwegel's punches, being first on every attack, and basically beating the bejesus out of Oosterwegel. But to his credit, Oosterwegel kept coming back, kept throwing flurries, and he seemed to look like he was looking for a knockout himself. He looked like he was sort of heavy-handed, although they weren't quite registering as much on George, but he was throwing haymakers, and some of them were connecting clean on the chin of George, on the chin of George Liddard. But I can say, guys, if you haven't seen it, go watch it. Very entertaining fight. George Liddard, a prospect that I will definitely continue to watch with, a very keen eye. Looks very accomplished in his performance on Saturday. Over to you, Base.
Yeah. So just to correct you on one thing, it was a 6-rounder, not an 8-rounder. If it was an 8-rounder, there is, I guess, potential that the fight would have been stopped, because Bas Oosterwegel is incredibly tough. But his defense was very sort of leaky from the front. His hands, even though he had his hands to his face and he was taking a lot of sting off of the shots, he never had his guard super tight, so they were still managing to go through the guard, and also they were coming around the side. But every moment where you thought, okay, this guy has been buzzed and this guy has been hurt, like if he's hurt, his powers of recovery are Wolverine-esque, because every time he got hurt, he was back in the fight immediately, or he would fire back just to let George know, no, you ain't got it this way. You're not getting this stoppage on your record. It's not about to go down like that. And there was 2 occasions, especially in round 5, was the most notable one, where George put on a massive flurry and knocked Ostavago into the corner. And Ostavago had the hands up, but he was getting tagged. He got tagged with about 4 or 5 unanswered shots. And you saw the referee, he made a step like he was about to run in and stop the fight. And then as soon as that happened, Ostavago came back with a 3-punch flurry himself. All 3 punches landed. He backed George up and then threw, I think it was a further 2 or 3 punches in sequence, and then just basically sat on George's chest for that moment and pushed him back in that moment. Obviously, George managed to get back control of the fight at that particular point, but it was like that from round 2 up until round 6, and you could tell that if it was an 8-rounder, either Ostavago would have got stopped, the referee would have stopped it, the corner would have stopped it eventually, or Liddard maybe would have tired, because even though he wasn't, he was basically being able to kind of work at a slower a pace, a pace closer to himself. He wasn't loading up on all of his shots, but he was probably throwing a lot more shots than he was anticipating he was going to have to. And you never know what the gas tank is going to be like for like a 3-0 prospect when you sort of get to that 7th and 8th round, especially when you've just been forced to work consistently for like four rounds straight, with no breaks. So yeah, again, as Tony said, and as I'm gonna tell you now, if you've not watched that fight, it's a 6-rounder. It's so what's that? That's 18 minutes plus maybe the break. So you got maximum 25 minutes. Take 25 minutes out of your day and watch it, because as a scrap, that was the one fight that I was watching on that before the bell, which made me say, you know what, I should have gone to this show. I had the opportunity to go several occasions, but I was a little bit, I decided last minute not to. But yeah, that I wish I was there to have seen that live, because it was just an amazing fight to watch from two novices. And sometimes those are the best fights that you have, like before the guys are seasoned and they've got the superb ring IQs, just 2 guys going at it hell for leather, made the best guy come out on top. And that's the type of fight that was. So yeah, if you haven't watched it, please go do so. And if anything, come back next week, put comments in the chat about what you thought of the fight. But yeah, we can move on from that one. Let's talk about Hrgovic, McKean, and then we'll briefly touch on the Chisora fight afterwards, and then we'll kind of call it wraps after that. But I'll let you go first, seeing as you was in attendance watching this one live, Tony.
Okay, so I've got some of my own footage that I shot from the side. Obviously, Filip Hrgovic, the mandatory IBF challenger to Alexander Usyk's title, was up against Dempsey McKean from Australia. Hrgovic, in his last performance against Zhile Zhang, most people considered that Zhang was the winner, but Hrgovic was at the time coming into that fight off the back of the death of his father, which may have affected him. So a lot of people kind of go, well, you know what? That probably might not have been the best of Filip Hrgovic, and obviously you expect him to improve going forward. When things are more settled and his camp isn't disrupted by terrible news like what he received before that camp. Based on that, though, and looking at the performance that you're seeing and we saw on Saturday night, I don't think Filip Hrgovic's level is anywhere near that of the elite, and I don't think he actually stands a chance, in my opinion, of actually beating Zhile Zhang, because I don't think he won the first fight. He was gifted the decision. But I think in a rematch, I think Zhang would ably deal with Filip Hrgovic. Now, as far as I'm concerned, Dempsey McKean was the more industrious of the two fighters, especially in the first half of the fight. Hrgovic tried to be more of a counter puncher. You see he's shooting the right hand to the stomach, but he suffers from what a lot of heavyweights suffer. He doesn't throw punches in bunches. And we're going to be talking about that a bit later, about a certain Mr. Anthony Joshua. But in this fight, it was McKean who, to me, was more industrial with his punches and threw more combinations, which, you know, you kind of want to see from a heavyweight. You want to see them combining shots. You see a two-piece there from Hrgovic. Then he's quite elusive. He moves around. He takes his time. And something I noticed in the fight against Zhang is he's a stop-start fighter. He doesn't work for 12 rounds. He'll work for one round, then take a rest, then do a couple of rounds, then take a rest, then do another couple of rounds, then take a rest. He's very much I won't push myself too far because I'm not sure my engine will be able to deal with, lasting into the end of the fight. So overall, I just thought that the performance was a little bit lackluster from Philip. I actually thought it was a fairly close fight because I thought Dempsey McKean in the rounds that he worked and he excelled in, those rounds were more telling for me than the rounds that Philip Hrgovic won. As far as the decision was concerned, I didn't actually score the fight at the time. I kind of felt it was one of them fights I could easily have fallen asleep at. I obviously didn't, but it just was a nothing fight for me. And I was looking to see who's going to take control of this. And to me, Philip Hrgovic, at no point does he actually take control of the fight. So bearing in mind his lofty position in the rankings compared to Dempsey McKean, I thought it was a poor performance.
Okay, I can agree somewhat. I think that's the third southpaw he's faced, the second southpaw in a row, but the third southpaw he's faced as a professional. Even in his first fight versus a southpaw, he didn't particularly look amazing, but I think at that point he had definitely transitioned into the I'm in love with my power type boxer, as opposed to the amateur boxing that he was employing previous. Also, the last few fights have coincided with his decision to have Ronnie Shields as his trainer. Now, I've said before that I don't think Ronnie Shields has got it anymore. And to me, there's an issue with that partnership there. Now, look, I'm not necessarily saying that Ronnie Shields is the reason why Hrgovic can't pull the trigger anymore or doesn't have any sort of engine. But yeah, the decline in his quality of work has kind of coincided with the acquisition of Ronnie Shields as main trainer. And obviously at this point, he is now fighting opposition closer to the level of where he needs to be to challenge for the titles, whereas before they were struggling to get him fights. So he was literally fighting the equivalent, the boxing equivalent of the bin man or the window cleaner, and he was maybe flattering to deceive a bit in those fights. But again, I feel like he was developing bad traits through a lot of those fights because of the level and having the punch power to get those guys out of there. However, that all being said, he did some fairly good things in this fight as well, which I feel were overlooked purely for the fact that the fight itself was very boring to sort of watch from an entertainment aspect, and also the fact that you've got Dempsey McKean, who was spoiling an awful lot in the fight. Now Dempsey did well to nullify the aggression of Philip Hrgovic in the first half, and stopping him from being able to get into a rhythm by sometimes counter punching, as you can see there, or on numerous occasions just stepping to the inside and tying up Hrgovic and just pushing him towards the ropes. Now Dempsey is a tough guy with a former MMA background, but as you can see there, like those double arm tie-ups, or even literally clasping his hands around the back of Filip Hrgovic at times throughout the fight, quite visibly and quite excessively, to the point I'm surprised that the ref, number one, didn't warn him, or number two, didn't take a point off at any time. But I think McKean's idea was to just weather the first 3 or 4 rounds and then make Hrgovic have to work back towards the end, which is kind of what he did. And he was starting to have success, especially in the middle to late rounds. I had Hrgovic up slightly in the 12th. I had it 6 rounds to 5 going into that 12th round, with Hrgovic basically just having to see it out with a bit of activity in order to win, or at best for Dempsey McKean to be able to get a late salvo and basically have the fight as a draw. Now Hrgovic luckily was able to take it out of the judge's hands with a very devastating sweeping right hand round the side of Dempsey McKean's guard, which he wasn't anticipating. And as I had stated in my video before the fight, do not be surprised if Filip Hrgovic rabbit punches and hits Dempsey McKean round the back of the head on numerous occasions. I expected it to happen from earlier on in the fight, but it only started to happen towards, I think, rounds 9, 10, and 11, sort of more consistently. But when he caught him and got him hurt in that first stanza in the 12th round, the next 3 shots, all 3 of them round the back of the head, scrambling that equilibrium. And Dempsey McKean, he wobbled to the point, and the ref decided to wave it off without initiating the full count. Considering that he was obviously still on his feet, maybe you could have carried on the count, looked in his eyes when he turned around before waving it off. But ultimately, I can't argue too much with the stoppage. I know that you could say let the guy carry on. He deserves that moment to just check to see if he can still go, just to assess him that way. But obviously, when the ref is counting, it's in the 12th round. There's like probably a minute and a half left to go. He's stumbling around like that. Ref probably felt it was safer to stop it there than to be sorry. But it was a great I guess it was a great win after a very labored like performance. But Hrgovic, one thing he had on McKean, he had the straight punches. Like his punch selection were better than McKean's overall. His punches were finding the target a lot cleaner, whereas McKean's punches, a lot of them were more Hrgovic is a lot straighter in his work. So it was that he's now defends his mandatory spot and has the opportunity to sort of get that win and obviously challenge for the title next. He says that's what he wants to do next off. Personally, I don't think that it's going to be I don't think that's going to be worth it, but it is what it is. We'll see. We'll see what happens if he does fight Usyk or Dubois next. If you guys saw the interview, you'll know kind of where I go with that one. But yeah, at this point in time, I would definitely feel like Usyk is not too worried about about the Hrgovic problem. But so it goes. Comment here from Danny. Hello, Base and Tony. How did age of Helenius compare to Wilder's? By comparing each performance, can you figure out? Okay, well, that fight's coming up in a moment, Danny, so you'll get your answers very shortly. Tony, what's my audio sounding like to you? And what's my picture looking like?
So the picture is okay, but your audio sometimes goes in and out. We did get a little bit of lag about a minute and a half ago, where you kind of almost went completely still without audio, and then you came back in.
Okay.
If anyone else can comment on how that looked from the web point of view, because it might be slightly different now because I'm in the application portal.
Okay. All right. Well, with that, let's power through and let's go to, well, actually no. Derek Chisora versus Gerald Washington. Real briefly, I'm gonna say that I predicted that Chisora would get a stoppage here, not because he's better than Washington, just by way of the fact of Washington seems to have almost like a mental fatigue or a gas tank fatigue between round sort of 4 to 5 whenever he's facing someone that's. However, I didn't expect Derek to look as slow and cumbersome as he was in there. Yes, I expected him to sort of be a bit labored, but he, to me, outside of rounds 1 to 2, looked bad, really bad. And Washington, I mean, I don't know how Malik Scott can get into his head, but he was definitely either in sparring partner mode or I can't afford to get clipped mode, because he did not press the action at any point past the third round. And to be honest, he had Derek Chisora over. I think it was in the second, even though it was from a bit of a shoulder as well as a bit of an arm push. But Chisora was there for the taking. His balance isn't great, but there was moments there where you really thought, he's about to go at this point. And Washington just didn't step on the gas. So it was a very cumbersome and boring, laborious, chief support that they'll call it. I'm not really going to speak too much more on it. But yeah, it was. We all say, we don't want to see Derek fight again, but ultimately he said he's going until that he wants 50 fights. So anyone who's seen my Twitter, you've seen the 3 fights I've said he should have next. All 3 winnable fights, but all 3 fights where he could also get his clock cleaned and maybe call it a day at that point as well. I think I said the next fight he should be against Mahmoud Shah. Char's always looking at a payday, and he's been so inactive as of late that would probably be a fairly safe bet for Derek. Said after that he should fight Adam Kovnatsky, because both of them are washed at this point. Adam's got very little punch resistance left. He doesn't throw the hardest of shots, but he keeps coming forward and keeps trying. So at least that should be more of an action-packed type fight. And last but not least, he should end his career with the Carlos Takam rematch. It should be Chisora Takam too, because that was an amazing fight. Takam could definitely put the nail in the coffin, because he's still moving and competing at a pretty high level, even at his advanced age. Maybe that one should be the next fight as opposed to the last one, because if it's the last one, Takam would definitely send him into retirement. But if it was me, those are 3 fights that I'd say you have those, and I will pay quite happily to watch you in those fights. Outside of that, especially on that top table, I will not be watching. And if Chisora is on any cards moving forward that I happen to either be at or be watching, that will be my time to take a break and do other things, just because he's not moving anywhere like how he used to. Tony, go for it, and we'll carry on afterwards.
So I've had the privilege of training with Derek Chisora. I worked with him when I was at Don Charles camp in Finchley. Obviously now Derek is no longer working with Don Charles. Derek is one of the most phenomenal trainers I've ever had the pleasure to sit and watch. Literally, he's a phenom in the gym. He's a gym rat as well. He keeps himself in good shape. But let me not mistake my words. I have seen more than enough. I never want to see the guy in the ring again. I love Derek. I think he's done very well for himself, and he's given the English public, some notable nights of pleasure. But it's time to hang them up, bro. I love you. If you're listening, if any of your people are watching, and I'm echoing what many other people are saying, I don't want to see another 3 fights. I could barely watch the fight on Saturday night. I'm like this. So that's my take.
All right, just before we get to the main event, because I guess we have disrespected the Romford Ball army at this point, the Bosch army as they call it. Real quick on that one. Good performance from Johnny Fisher. It was a good performance from Harry Armstrong as well, and with very little excuse of late last minute opponent late notice, because he did have time to train. Maybe didn't reflect that looking at him necessarily on the scales. I don't know what he's usually used to looking like, but he can move. And funny enough, this is maybe going to sound a bit of a bad take to some people just because of the level differences, but a lot of what he does in the ring reminds me of Tyson Fury. He has a very Tyson Fury-esque type style, type positioning, the way he's on the front foot, not so much necessarily herky-jerky, but there was a lot of old Tyson Fury in him, in my mind, like that traveler energy. Now, he did very well to basically get up from the first 20-second salvo that Johnny Fisher caught him with, and eventually started to push Johnny back and started to actually just work behind the jab. Always out of range to really throw the backhand. But he was, ultimately he was pretty much doing well in there, and he was making Johnny have to work harder than he has worked, to a point where he was backing Johnny up, and he was having to basically try and just pick one punch selected shots from sort of rounds 3, 4, 5. Like his engine was really starting to flag on E. But Johnny does what you do in those moments. You seize one opening and you just take a superior puncher, and you let your hands go. And ultimately, he caught Armstrong with a peach of a shot, which looks like it knocked him out on his feet. He dipped down into a squat position. The rope held him up, but he got back up onto his feet and looked clear-headed pretty much after that. But it also busted his eye open, and that was pretty much where he looked like, okay, the writing's on the wall from this point. I think it might have been strategic to have Johnny in this first sort of like 12 rounder or 10 rounder. I think it might have been actually for the southern area, but in there with someone that doesn't have a punch, a KO percentage or big one punch power. Because had Armstrong have had a bit more punch variety and power than we saw, Fisher could have been in trouble, especially after that third round where he was getting backed off and he was getting hit and caught with jabs and and everything else. So ultimately it was good for him to get his first title, but there's still a lot of work to be done there. I'm still fairly confident in my prediction and assessment of where I think his career will end up in, sort of in that sense. But there are improvements being made, and if for nothing else, he's a good fighter to have on undercard, not from a ticket sales point of view, because obviously he'll always have that, but just the fact of he's at least going to give it a go. No matter what happens, he's going to give it a go. And I got to commend him for that. But both him and Harry deserve a lot of respect, especially for I guess saving the energy of the card after that stinker of a opening contest between Campbell Hatton and Tom Ansell, which we will not be discussing in any shape or form on this show today. Tony, what did you think, real quick?
Yeah, so I've been to quite a few of Johnny Fisher's fights. He seems to always be on the undercards when I'm at the O2. Look, I see Johnny Fisher's work rate. I follow him on social media. I see him in the places he needs to be. and around the boxing community, he's well known. He's a hard-working kid, and he's what you might consider salt of the earth. Just go out there, learn your craft the hard way. We're going to be talking in a week's time or two about Dan Aziz and the way he's addressed his upcoming fight with Joshua Buatsi. Johnny Fisher is just Dan Aziz at an early stage. Whether he can ever get to the levels that Dan Aziz is currently at, different ball game. But there's something in me that says the air in the heavyweight division is going to clear in the next year and a half. And in that period, Johnny Fisher will have improved, and he will potentially be somebody you might need to consider in amongst what we would consider the world top 10. I'm not writing it off. I mean, Britain is definitely got great fighters, good fighters at heavyweight. And there's going to be some interesting fights on the way to that status if he carries on the way he does. But I wouldn't put it past him to get there, because to me, he works harder than the others. That's me done.
Okay. Yeah,
can I just address what Danny said about Dan Aziz and his 65 fights as an amateur? Dan Aziz's amateur career was not good. He'll tell you that. He told you that on a neutral corner. His amateur career, he should have given up boxing. Johnny Fisher, yeah, he's a latecomer, but as I said, when hard work works, it can beat talent if talent don't work hard. And Johnny Fisher, just by his work rate and attitude, could become a prominent fighter in this division in a year and a half. I ain't saying within the next year when the big hitters are still there. But I don't think in a year and a half, the picture in the heavyweight division is going to contain Usyk or Fury or Joshua or Wilder. And at that point, things are going to be different. And we will see. Mark my words.
I'm not sure. I mean, look, you're still gonna have Jalilov. You're gonna have Torres, who we haven't spoken about, but again, he's moving leaps and bounds. He's the same age as Johnny Fisher.
I'm not that impressed by Richard Torres. I really am not. I think he's a very
if you're impressed,
fighter.
if you're more impressed by Johnny Fisher than you are Richard Torres, we can't have this conversation right now. I'm sorry, but we can talk about that off air, because all I'm just basically saying, you've got Jared Anderson, however long he decides to want to stick around for. Mm-hmm. You've still got the other fringe guys, like Johnny Rice is still about. You've got new sort of up and comers. You've got even the English set, like Solomon Dacus is still there. You've
Adelaide, got Fabio Wardley.
Yeah, you've got all of those guys. Plus, you've still got people like Murat Gassiev. Let's not forget, he's only 29. He's still knocking around. All of these guys are in the same era. They're all in the level, or that age range of Johnny Fisher, F.A. Jagba, and these guys. So I don't see how he gets in the mix amongst those guys. Martin Bakole, Kosobutsky. Maybe Kosobutsky might be a bit older, so he might end up moving out of there. But look, we can talk about it off air. But I like Johnny. I like his work rate. I like him as a guy, as an individual. He's a good guy. I think that he's definitely got a good work rate. In terms of what you said there, yeah, I can't co-sign that one right now.
Fight Fan TV just plunged in with the perennial glass chin Tony Yoko. Really?
Well, you say glass. You say glass chin. He hasn't been knocked out as a pro. So
see, look at this. You're bringing in Matty Harris after his last 2 performances and trying to compare him to what Johnny Fisher does.
Last 2. He only had 1 performance where he was stopped. The
performance before that did not look good.
But he looked good for the first few rounds. And then got tired.
This is my point. Johnny Fisher
But Johnny
shows
Fisher
that
done
he's
the
doing
exact same
stuff.
thing against someone who didn't have punch power, Tony. So what are you really saying?
I get it. Let's move on.
Because you're not gonna win this argument, not now. But it's fine.
Okay.
We what we can do, right? 15th of August, 2023. So we've got the show here, and you said a year and a half, right? We'll revisit this in either at the start of 2025 if we're still both here, and we'll see basically how your prediction stuck. Yeah, we'll do that. Right, ladies and gentlemen, now we will move on to the main event of the card. And again, since you was in attendance, I will let you sort of lead this one off with regards to Anthony Joshua versus Robert Helenius, who was a 5-day replacement. So yeah, go for it.
So Robert Helenius comes in 249.4 against AJ's 250, very similar heights. Obviously Helenius is a slight bit taller, but this is round one, I think, round 1 or 2. You can see Helenius is going straight to work. He's pushing forward towards AJ. Both AJ hands held high, trying to find that single jab. And Helenius comes with a 1-2. He's more engaging. AJ pouring out. Single straight right hand. Single jab. Pause the right. Single right overhand. Tentatively moving around. Helenius just eyeing him up. Taking his time. What's interesting here is Helenius is holding center ring. Helenius is holding center ring, and he's choosing when they're going to engage. AJ is just choosing to try to stay out of harm's way. Yeah, because we found out later in the fight that AJ goes back to Derek James and says, I can't find the right. I can't find the right hand onto the chin of Helenius. And that, to me, was a telling story. The fact that he went back in his corner and said, I can't find the right. What do you want Derek James to tell you? I mean, literally, I could tell a 6-year-old how to find the right hand, and that should be it. You shouldn't be coming back to me 30 fights deep, I can't find the right hand. Yeah? These are fundamentals. Distance control, short jab there, short jab. Moving his head nicely. He's not really on his toes. He's, moving his upper body, moving his head, but his feet are pretty static. Pouring jab, getting beaten by a much better, longer jab. So he's getting hit in the face by a longer jab, and he's pouring his own jab. And that's what causes the facial damage. And something I think has to be noted is the last 2 fights, his facial damage is getting worse. He's coming out of fights and you're like, rah, he got beat up. But, I'm just not seeing enough volume. I'm not seeing enough strategy from AJ. Again, Helenius is holding center ring here. AJ is just going around him. He kind of circles in the same direction. Doesn't really do anything laterally that makes him have to think, what can I do next? And then Helenius will just prod him with the jab. And then the overhand right follow. So he's throwing the 1-2s, the double jab as you saw. And then AJ is pouring with the left hand. Pouring with the left hand. He's not saying, I'm going to do, throw a stiff jab to his chest, or I'm going to change up the way the jab is. I'm going to up jab or do anything. He's literally pouring with punches. Round 5. Oh, some action. Left to the body, right to the head. Yeah. Good action to start round 5 from AJ. Pouring with the jab again. There we go. But as you see, through the 1-2, but it misses. And then when Helenius comes in, he's not quick enough to time him. So the right hand ends up going over Helenius' head. Pouring. Helenius coming forward again and initiating the action, throwing his 1-2s. Stiff jab from Helenius. AJ pouring. Helenius easily picks it off. Pouring again. Helenius looking very comfortable. Look, his hands around his waist. Why? Because he feels comfortable. I'm not being hit by anything. I'm not getting hit with anything irregularly. I'm not being put under pressure. So I can dominate this. Unlike what Wilder did when he fought Helenius. I'm sure Base is going to have something to say about that, how they two compared. But to me, AJ just doesn't do enough to be able to press the action and shorten the distance between himself and Helenius. Too much pouring. And there's stats that show that. Now, I think I've seen enough because essentially from that, that's the ammo of the fight up until the end. And I have that as a separate video to show because I think that just needs its own little section. Base, what's your thoughts on what we've seen and that whole build up to the last bit of the fight?
So people ask me what I'm not saying they directly asked me, but it was asked, how do you, if you could describe AJ's fight or his performance in one word, what would you describe it? And on the night, my initial take was it was concerning, because everything was there to do better than was done. Now, maybe at that particular time, we wouldn't have got the highlight reel KO. Maybe it might have been more of a stoppage as opposed to, a one and done and he's just on the ground. But AJ's footwork was pretty good. I'll give him that. Sort of when he was.
Can I interject there? Can I just interject there? Just on that point. AJ's footwork was pretty good. What is the point of footwork if you can't move into range and out on a regular basis?
Well, I was about to go there, but no, that's fine. It's a very valid question. His footwork is a little bit better than it was, than it previously was, and it didn't look as if he was. Before, it always used to look like he was thinking about where he needs to place his feet. Now, his movement felt a little bit more natural. So I feel as if the Derek James situation with regards to AJ is like, okay, we've got one part of the game down, but the problem is, I feel, AJ said that, and I've put this in my video, so I've said it before, but AJ said that Rob McCracken didn't teach him defense. Well, in my opinion, I don't know if Derek James is teaching him defense either, because I've never seen him take as many shots in his last two fights, in any fights against Robert McCracken. That's not including the even in the first, the first Ruiz fight. He got a couple of counter shots and heavy shots and went down, but he wasn't consistently getting his head pinged off. And in the Usyk fights, those weren't even Rob McCracken at that point, because they had a big team in the camp or whatever. So it's just, a lot of it to me was like there was no commitment behind that footwork. And it's like Derek James is a good trainer for you if you're actually going to be busy and you're going to commit to shots. But AJ is like, he's moving around looking for maybe one up, one down, but there's nothing there. Whereas obviously someone like Errol Spence, who, I've called basic, I've called overrated, but if you're going to fight in that method, you need to have a work rate. That was still one of the reasons why maybe, even if Terence Crawford could have got Errol Spence out of there a lot quicker than he did, like the fact that Spence was still working and was active is what made Crawford decide, okay, I need to keep my eyes open here and be cautious and not just go for it, every single point. And that's what AJ is going to need to do. He's going to need to be busier, especially if you look at the fact of he is a very strong and a very concussive puncher. I'm not going to say he's a super one punch knockout, but he's a guy that if he hits you, you normally get hurt. So with that being the case, it makes no sense why you wouldn't be even more active with the jab hand. You don't even have to throw the back. You don't have to throw the backhand behind it if you don't want to. Just keep that jab moving consistently, like double it up, triple it up at times if you have to. Just keep the other person unsettled. Step into range. Like get them on their back foot where they can't then generate their power. And also you gotta look, like in this fight, even in the Jermaine Franklin fight, in both the Usyk fights, like AJ he was the bigger guy here, like by half a pound or a pound, whatever it was. In the Jermaine Franklin fight, he was about 20 pounds the bigger guy. And Usyk fights, both of them, he was about 20 pounds the bigger guy. And he's constantly giving up real estate to smaller people. Obviously this one, yeah, Helenius is taller, but you're letting Robert Helenius push you around the ring. Like that, to me, doesn't signify much confidence in my opinion. And again, as I said, I don't know if maybe AJ has now just got like skin or facial problems or a nose or issue in particular. Obviously we've seen his nose leak before, but again, never to the level that it has in the last couple of fights, to the point where his nose was leaking before he even went in the ring in the last fight against Jermaine Franklin. So I need to know what kind of defense that Derek James is teaching you, because if you didn't learn it from Rob, I don't know if you're learning it now. And yeah, it's a bit, like I said, it was a concerning performance because there was many moments where instinctually as a boxer, you should know either that you're in range or that you need to create or change the game plan to make basically to make an opening. He's like, I can't find the right hand, but it's like you need to push. You need to push the action. You need to create the opening. Like if the game plan isn't working, you need to be able to learn how to adapt that game plan on the fly or try something different. Like you shouldn't have to always be told by your coach how to adjust, how to make the adjustment. Sure, the coach is supposed to tell you what they're seeing that maybe you don't see at that time, but if you're an elite boxer, you need to be able to figure some things out on the fly. So yeah, like I said, it was concerning, and that lack of impetus to sort of just go for broke at times, I think is what's gonna stop him from being what he needs to be moving forward up until the point he decides to call it a day. But yeah, that's my thoughts on it overall. Tony, back to you.
Cool. So a couple of comments have come in, so I want to address them before I get to the final knockdown and show you, how that finished. So yeah, Jam Down says, isn't that what Derek is there to instruct AJ about? You're not stepping in order to land the right. I noticed with Derek James, he's a very, very mobile cornerman. Yeah, he goes in and he starts demonstrating. Yeah, there are guys who go in the corner and they talk their fighter into instruction. Derek shows his fighters. He does this with everybody. He comes in, he gets you prepped up, and then he starts showing what punches he wants to see. And clearly he works on these things in training. So it's very strange to me that not only am I being told what to do, but I'm being showed, I need to see this, I need to see this, and you're not following the instruction. Wilder has fought one round in 2 years. I'm not worried about how AJ looks. Deontay is in a worse position. If you really think that, man, then you could be in for a rude awakening, my friend. A very, very rude awakening. I'm not saying it's impossible that AJ knocks out Wilder, but if you think Deontay's in a worse place under his new coach, Malik Scott, brother, you ain't watching something. 6 years ago, we were calling AJ robotic. Sometimes we forget how far he has come along, head movement and all. Yes, he has come a long way, but he's also regressed. And that's the most important element of what we're talking about now. We are talking about a regression. Because interestingly, I looked at the AJ Dillian White fight on Friday night ahead of seeing him fight Helenius. And I was like, rah, if this AJ turns up tomorrow, Helenius is done in 3 rounds. But it was nowhere near. He doesn't throw the combinations. He doesn't shorten up the shots. He doesn't step into range the way he did back in the day.
Brilliant comment there by Jamdan. Read that one.
AJ has always been a 1, 2, 3, 4 type of guy. If his opponent does something to bring those numbers out of sync, 2, 4, 3, 1, then AJ comes across lost in the ring, to be honest. I mean, it's you mentioned 1, 2, 3, 4. I think it's as simple as 1, 2, 3. I don't think you need a huge arsenal of punches to beat AJ right now. I don't think you need to be throwing a fusillade of different shots to confuse him. I think Robert Helenius showed that actually I'm not going to do anything amazingly difficult. I'm not throwing shots from strange angles. I'm fundamentally a good fighter. I've got heavy hands. But if I can just lead with my long jab and consistently hit you in the middle of the nose, that's a problem for me.
Fight fan, you know what? You're right. AJ took 7 rounds to beat both Brazil and Helenius, yet Wilder just took 1 to flatten both. Obviously, the caveat to that is Wilder had a full extensive training camp for Helenius and had obviously been in one of his chief sparring partners for numerous years, whereas AJ had the 5 days there. And AJ definitely had the much better version of Dominic Brazil, the unbeaten guy that didn't know how to lose and had heart. Whereas, Wilder obviously caught him. He caught him devastatingly, but at that point, I feel like the Brazil that he fought, I don't think there was any belief in that Brazil that he was going to do anything. But I agree. Although we can flip it and reverse it and say it took Wilder 9 rounds to get rid of Eric Molina, whereas it took AJ 3. So, swings and roundabouts, styles, different combinations of people. So it is what it is. But you're totally right. There is certain patterns there, especially if you look at the taller guys. The taller guys that AJ has fought, he seems to take longer to get them out of there. And Wilder, they seem to line up perfectly for him because he doesn't have to put any trajectory on his shots. They just fly straight. So,
Jamdon is intent on saying that Wilder's in a worse place. You mentioned 1 round in 2 years for a fighter that also has a poor gas tank is not going to help him. If Wilder cannot take AJ out in 4 rounds, then he's in trouble. I agree with you. I'm not going to disagree with you. But those 4 rounds could be hell for AJ. And based on the way his face has been marking up of late, he could be in a serious deficit after 4 rounds, where Wilder then just has to coast. Now, you got to ask yourself the question, can AJ, after being pummeled around the ring for 4 rounds, significantly change the atmosphere of the fight into his favor, where he becomes the battering ram in that situation and is now punching Wilder from pillar to post? We'll come to this later. Let's get the fight on and we can discuss it then. But really and truly right now, I'm focusing on AJ, what I've seen Saturday night. And to me, I'm worried. Let's move on to the actual finish because got that on a separate video. I think it was fairly emphatic in what he did. Footwork is important in this. It's so important. For the first time, well, probably one of very few times in the fight, he actually gets his feet in the kill zone. Step in, boom. He's in the kill zone. Now, I like this shot. If you're looking at this shot with Anthony's hand, the extended arm, he's catching Helenius on the end of that shot. It's a beautiful place to catch a guy. But you know what's even more beautiful? You could catch him about 6 inches shorter. Because there's the finished result. But because I'm going to show you visually, if I throw the right hand, yeah, if I catch you here, there's more power than when I catch you here fully extended. I want to catch you here with a hook as opposed to here. Here. This is where my maximum power is. Boom! That's it. That's where my maximum power wants to be. The follow through can still knock you out. Yeah? The jab. Boom! The arm here is not extended. But if I catch you with a jab, boom! Right there, I'm going to cause damage. Extended, I'm still going to cause damage. But when you catch someone on the short of the shot, that's your maximum damage point. And that's where, to me, the problem for AJ is because he's not moving his feet in, he's not getting in the kill zone where he can effect that. Look at the Dillian White stoppage, kill zone, the epitome of kill zone. In, catch the man right there. Visually, he's right here. He's not here. Yeah, he's here. That's my kill zone. Your views on the stoppage, my friend?
He finally found his range. I mean, that's pretty much all I can really say about it. The same thing that he should have realistically found 3 rounds earlier than that, because he did a similar move to that, I think, in the third. And then it took him four rounds to find it again. Whereas Helenius was backing off in the third when he done it. When it came to that 7th round, at that point he was slower than he was previously. So, and he was coming towards AJ in a lot of the rounds prior to that. So the fact that he wasn't able to quote unquote find that shot or find that range, find that distance, again, like I said, I have concerns of the entire performance. All of this whole, I want to be a boxer stuff, like, that's all well and good. Yeah, there's some bits that you are picking up. There are some improvements I see there, but ultimately, if the aim is to box and it's the sweet science, well, the sweet science is hit and not get hit. You're getting hit more than you was getting hit before. So something there's got to be a switch that that goes off at some point. Otherwise, you call it a day. I don't know. Like I said, I'm indifferent. I'm not. I've never been like the biggest AJ fan, but I've supported his career. I like, obviously I like what he's done for the sport. I think he gets unfairly criticized by everyone, probably even by us as well, because maybe we just think we see more from him than is actually really there. And maybe that's just the case with in general, like, he gets held to this standard which maybe he shouldn't, which might be unfair to him. But yeah, I'm just not I'm just not convinced that he's gonna get back to the heights that maybe both him, Matchroom, and maybe even the country need him to get to keep, you know, British boxing where it should be in the world. I don't know. Yeah. Congrats on the victory. Last minute opponent made the necessary adjustments, but just not quick enough to me, and a lot of stuff needs to change. I would definitely try and have another. If I'm hearing rumors that the Saudi thing may not even take place until just before Ramadan now in March. So if that's the case, get back out in early December before Christmas. Fight, you know, have another fight. Just you need to just stay active. Just keep working, because that's what you're going to need.
It's very risque. I'm going to be honest with you. I think there's a lot of young bucks out there would be salivating at the thought of getting the payday against AJ right now.
You don't put him in against a young buck. You put him in. If you think about it, Deontay Wilder is 38 by the time that they have their fight, right?
Mm-hmm.
You've got Tyson Fury, who is 30. I think he just turned 35. You know, Dillian will be 36 next year. So ultimately, you don't put him in there with young bucks. You keep him in there with his class, his generation. Like you have him in there with the 35, 36, 37, 38. Unless you're going to put him in there with the perfect stylistic matchup, as I've always said, FA Jagba. And the fact that FA is probably about to get beat in 2 weeks by Zan Kusabutsky, that might be the perfect person, because you get to work on your Wilder game plan against someone that is now going to have a second loss, arguably by stoppage at that point. That to me is the perfect preparation for you to then fight this 38-year-old. There's no reason for him to be in there with any one of the quote unquote young bucks. Or even if you win a title, if you win a title again, go and do a world tour with that one title. Don't try unify. Don't leave the younger generation. Just keep fighting the people in your generation, because you ain't got nothing else to prove outside of that. Like you've done all that. You're never gonna be undisputed. It's never gonna happen for you. You're not, number one, you're not good enough to do that. Number two, it's gonna take way too long, and we know that realistically he's got one foot out the door right now. So just go with the people of your generation or your age, in and around that, the same people that are exhibiting slippage the same as you are. And yeah, you just keep it moving there. You let the new up and comers fight each other. Let them fight each other for the opportunity to then win a belt from someone else or win a vacant belt afterwards. That's how I see it. So yeah, I have no worries about the quote unquote the young bucks, none whatsoever.
Cool. Gorgaruga, nice to see you in the chat. Helenius jab was on point and he didn't get over aggressive and reckless like he did with Wilder. Yeah, I thought he boxed very well. As you see, he mashed up the face of Anthony Joshua. But yeah, overall, work to be done. Work to be done. You know, the question is, who you sparring? You know, I know you're away in Dallas and you're working with Errol Spence, but Errol Spence is training at 2. You're training at 6. Right? Ryan Garcia is training at 1. You're training at 6. Frank Martin is training at 11. You're training at 6. So you ain't sparring any of them. You ain't seeing them. Maybe in passing. And, you know, that when Derek James explains that, you kind of go, well, they're totally different. He trains them differently. He's seeing different things from his other fighters, and he can manipulate them differently. And as a trainer myself, I see that myself. I can see every single fighter's flaws, and how I deal with them is totally different depending on who I'm working with. In fact, talking about coaching, big up to Lee Cuxton in the chat. That's my fellow coach at Kroigas. Lee, love what you're doing, my friend. Keep on doing it. And yeah, we got some good boys there. But yeah, you know, we treat each fighter individually. Some of them, you know, you got real hard work to convince them to do this or do that. Others, you got to be hard and, you know, shout and swear at them. You know, some I can give instruction, just tell them and they listen intently. I've got some guys that I don't have to show anything. I can literally just say, do this, and they do it. Whereas there are others, I literally have to show them. I have to go in the ring, put the gloves on and say, right, stand here, do this. When I do that, you do this. That's how boxing is. Each fighter has different needs. And ultimately, there are some guys that are so gifted. As I said, they come in the ring without a great deal of instruction, they already get it. So, look, I think I'm done.
Yeah, look, ladies and gentlemen, we see all the comments. Thank you everyone who is tuning in. It's, you know, a bit late again. Apologies, won't be as late next week. That was, like I said, my fault. I've had a bit of a long day, but we are here, and ultimately, we'll hope that things can improve, or we get the results we need as a nation, as a community, however you wanna broach it. But yeah, look, that's both of us done. It's getting late now, so it's time to sign off. Tony, tell the people where they can find you.
So, guys, I am on all the social media platforms apart from, I don't do the younger ones, TikTok or Snapchat, but Twitter is Pugilistboy, Instagram is Pugilisticboy, and YouTube is Pugilistboy.
All right. And as for me, BaseDaKID, the hardcore casual, as you can see there, that is the YouTube channel. If you're not already signed and subscribed over there, please go do so. Probably be new videos out tomorrow at some point, probably late in the day now. I'll can't bother to do any tonight for the early morning uploads, but there should be some from tomorrow all the way through till Sunday. I will be at shows on Friday. I'll be at Queensbury show on Friday, so you might get some content from there. I should be at the Matchroom show on Saturday as well, so you should get some content from there. We should have a fairly short, breezy show to talk about some stuff next week. BaseDaKID on Instagram. Again, I don't post boxing stuff on there. I barely post on my Instagram. I'm just there like reacting to other things. So yeah, don't go in there for any like breaking news or updates stuff. I don't normally on there for that. But if you want that kind of stuff from me, Twitter is where you need to catch me. B_A_S_E, or just type in BaseDaKID. And luckily I am the first one that pops up on the list now, so I must be doing something right. With that being said, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for watching. Both Tony and I will catch you next week. And yeah, for right now, peace out.